I call this meeting of council to order. You'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder,
Here.
Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Moore, here, Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here. Public hearing. The public hearing originally scheduled for tonight on ordinance number 2022-0-05 is postponed until July 12th. Council is still working on it. So again, the public hearing originally scheduled for tonight is rescheduled for July 12th. Okay, some ground rules for tonight and every night for council meeting. There will be no clapping, no cheering, no jeering, no outbursts, snarling, hissing, or spitting. Okay? I just expect everybody to be well behaved. Listen. Don't be having your little side conversations, please. You know, because they do end up getting on tape. We end up hearing some of those. Not always a good idea. This is an open meeting. All meetings of council are open meetings. That means you're allowed to listen. You're allowed to attend. You're allowed to watch. You're not necessarily allowed to speak, except when we provide you that time. So there are 2 times that you're allowed to speak at a council meeting. Those are the open to the public to speak sections. One is before legislation and one is after legislation. Okay. So now we will move on to approval of the minutes. Regular meeting of council, May 24th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, aye, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Clerk, is there any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence tonight.
Does any member of council have correspondence tonight?
I do.
Mr. Bittner.
So I received an email from Mr. Anthony Monfenderi. He said, "Hello, Kevin. I just wanted to voice my concern about the proposed Dollar General being built at the closed church on Andrews Road. I am all for new things to make our city better, but I do not believe we need anything Dollar General when there are already 2 within a 5-mile radius and 2 other dollar stores less than a half mile away. The city would do better with something different to enhance the city. Thank you, Anthony."
Does anyone else have correspondence tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eva, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, the public here this evening. I will start with the fire department report for the month of May. For the month of May 2022, there were a total of 111 calls for service. 21 of those were fire service calls, 90 rescue EMS calls. Of those 90 calls, there were 18 calls for invalid assist. There were no calls that required Narcan. Thank God. Department activity on May 16th and 23rd, the students from Lake Elementary came to the fire department for a safety talk and tour. On May 30th, the department was honored to represent the city at the Menor Harbor Yachting Club annual Memorial Day ceremony. I would like to congratulate our members celebrating their service anniversary in May. Firefighter Mike Spencer, 37 years. Firefighter Lee Santos, 7 years. Firefighter Chris Brantes, 2 years. We have, I will hold up for a minute. TV last week, I understand, I was gone. Received an email from Tom Gillette. Tom is the former mayor of Bay Village. He's met with Holly and I probably October of last year. He works for Hannah Commercial Real Estate. And he saw the story about the Dollar General and so on and so forth. And we have invited in Tom and Mac Digger from Hannah Real Estate to the next council meeting, the June 28th council meeting. When we first met with them, I gave them a copy of our zoning map showing all the vacancies. As I said, Tom saw the new Channel 5 report and has some background in city planning. But what we've asked Tom to discuss at the next council meeting would be what he could potentially do to develop a city plan for us. That's, I also received several emails over the last week or so, and I'll just kind of summarize because they were all kind of a copy and paste from others. The first one had to do with Burger King, like Overlook Beach Park. And my response was, thank you for the email. I appreciate your thoughts. The proposed townhouse development at the corner of Andrews and Lakeshore will not be rental property, but townhouses for sale. This was a change made by the developer based on community demand. As far as the Burger King vacancy, I remain in contact with the corporate real estate office to build a space with one of the corporate stores. We have an estimate on the Lake Overlook Beach Park project, which was shared with City Council. The estimate is $1.2 million. With council's approval, the project will be financed over 15 years. I remain optimistic we can eventually get a restaurant at Better Beach Park. My concern with your proposal, which I didn't get into, the proposal was, again, other things that would cause traffic. As far as moratoriums, I would not want to discourage anyone from approaching the city with a business proposal by passing moratoriums on certain businesses. By reading these in our ordinances, they may be hesitant to approach us. The next one, this was from, I believe Anthony, that Mr. Bittner got. I can't pronounce the last name. It starts with that. Okay. He says, hello, Eva. I want to voice my concerns about the proposed Dollar General being built at the closed church on Andrews Road. I'm all for a new thing to make the city better, but I don't believe we need another dollar store when there are already two within a 5-mile radius and 2 other dollar stores less than a half-mile away. The city would do better with something different to enhance the city. Again, hi, Anthony. Thank you for your email. As mayor and part of the city administration, we listen to all developers who would like to invest in our city. Our planning and zoning commission, along with city council, have the final approval for the development plans. The city does not own the church property. As far as who buys the church property, we don't get involved with the sale. I hope this answers my role in the whole process of new businesses coming. Another one, I just saw your city, so I believe it's somebody from outside the city. I just saw your city's thinking of putting a Dollar General in place of the church. I wrote to you suggesting a city pool or recreation center. Thank you for the email. The church is privately owned and not the property of the city. The city council approves large expenses incurred by the city. We have given council an estimate on saving like Overlook Beach Park from falling into the lake. The project will cost approximately $1.2 million. Projects such as a city pool or recreation center would potentially lead to an increase in taxes for our residents. A levy put on the ballot would have to be approved by our residents. I hope this explanation answers your need. That was really the gist of everything I got. That concludes my.
Thank you. Administrative Director, Mrs. Bartone, good evening.
Good evening. expenditure approval request for CE consultants. When we get to that point, I can explain it more.
Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening. The short manner, postponing the public hearing that was set for tonight. I think it would be best if we had council vote, postpone it. Line 12 so that we have that.
Okay.
Other than that, no report.
Is there a motion to officially postpone the public hearing to the 12th? Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Now it's officially postponed.
Thank
Anytime. All right, questions to administration and department heads? Are there any? Hearing none, we will move on to board, committee, and commission reports. Special committee on the moratorium, Tuesday, May 31st.
So we met at 7 p.m. to review the moratorium. In attendance was myself, Mr. Shaboo, Mr. Morris, Ms. Moore, Mr. Johnson, and a lot of members of the public. We first started talking about the moratorium, and then we went into even talking about restricting small box stores, kind of adding that into our ordinance, prohibiting them in business 1 and business 2. We further said we would talk to Mr. Lyons about that. If we could even add language that would be allowed. There was some more discussion about it, and then it was determined that President Johnson actually wanted us to talk as a committee about ordinances pertaining to the moratorium, sign regulations, architectural design, impact on the community. So the committee decided, with the input of the public, that we took a couple surrounding cities and we're going to look into their ordinances, compare them to ours, and see if there's anything we can pull out of theirs versus ours. We're going to work further on this, do some research, and then meet back in the near future. Meeting ended at 8:50.
Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yes, they met on June 6th at 6 o'clock. They met to discuss the PUD and the moratorium. In attendance was Suzanne Cason, Mike Sweeney, Al Busher, Brent Moore, and myself. City council members were Jim Lunder, Michelle Moore, Kevin Bittner, Rob Johnson, Paul Morris, and several residents. The PUD was thoroughly reviewed and changes were made in these sections. 1255.01 A3 was deleted. 1255.02 D3 added PUD refers to the base zoning if and when the purpose for which the PUD was granted is no longer viable. 1253.03 D deleted the words and except. 1255.04 one family detached homes and townhouse verbiage was deleted. 1255.05 C maximum units per acre for each type of dwelling was changed to 6 for one family attached, 2 family attached to 8, and condominiums to 12 per acre. 1255.06 condominium maximum coverage changed to 60%. 1255.05 development standards with the setback was revised. 1255.8.08 added verbiage were added to reference section 1242.05. On the proposed moratorium, it was suggested that at the end there's 3 sections, to keep those 3 sections with a new definition for small box stores. They'd like it to read small box discount store shall be defined as a retail store between 5,000 and 15,000 square feet that sells at retail an assortment of physical goods, products, or merchandise directly to the consumer, including food or beverages, for off-premise consumption, household products, personal grooming and health products, and other consumer goods. Small box discount stores do not include small box stores that, one, contain a prescription pharmacy, two, sell gasoline or diesel fuel, three, primarily sell specialty food items or daily prepared foods such as meat, seafood, cheese, or other items, other similar food items. Dedicated, number four, dedicated at least 15% of shelf space to fresh frozen for the food. The commission also suggested that the term on it would be 6 months. This is a pretty good proposal they have for something like that. They also proposed a new section for 1242.025 that expands the application process and an economic assessment statement were also suggested. Next meeting will be July 11th, 2022.
Thank you. Committee of the Whole to discuss the PUD and the CRA. That met on June 7th, 2022. Present were myself, Mr. Bittner, Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Moore, Mr. Morris, and Mr. Shaboo. We went over the changes to the proposed PUD by the Planning and Zoning Commission, most of which were agreed to. There were a couple things that were changed. One was restoration of the verbiage that was stricken by planning and zoning, where 20% or more of the aggregate street frontage of the abutting property between two successive intersecting streets is occupied by buildings. The average of the setbacks of the existing buildings within 100 feet on either side of the lot shall determine the setback line for that lot, was voted to be restored in there. Also, the word fronts that had been added in was removed. There was a discussion on the CRA. One was the removal of the tax abatement for construction of multifamily. That was the original intent of council when the CRA was originally drafted. Unfortunately, we didn't get it completely right. Numbering in the CRA needs to be corrected. There's a couple things that are incorrect there. Add into in a section specifically for 0 years for the construction of any residential facility containing 2 or more units, just to be clear that we're not allowing that at all. And we had a discussion regarding tax abatement for new commercial. Should we reduce the amount or the number of years? Currently, it is up to 15 years and up to 100%. We're going to look at what other communities have done with that. And then there was just some discussion over remodeling for multifamily and commercial. And then there was a further discussion regarding whether there should be consistency between the number of years. There was a suggestion to reduce tax abatement for new commercial to 7 years from 15, considering that 15 years is a very long time. Council has the ability to negotiate to reduce the abatement amount 4 years, depending on the project. We also discussed the residential application of CRAs that they must be applied within 6 months. And we're going to work on getting a draft for legislation for a future meeting. And that's all for that one. Ordinance Committee.
Ordinance committee meeting was called to order at 7 p.m. last night, June 13th. Discussion was held regarding the golf carts ordinance, which has been referred to Attorney Lyons to be written and updated. We discussed the fencing ordinance, which we're going to type up and send an email to Mr. Lyons to have it looked at to update, adding language, clarifying what a fence repair would be, and also some cleanup of the zoning district language and some redundant language that was in that ordinance. We discussed the right of way. Another email is going to go to Mr. Lyons to have him review some of the language clarification that was discussed about nuisance items. And if we change that, if there's any like problems interfering with the higher revised code, that also has some going on right of ways. And the meeting adjourned at 7:56 PM.
Thank you. Is there any other board or commission reports that we've missed? Hearing none. We'll move on to open to the public to speak. All right, this is the portion of the meeting where we're allowed, meaning you, the public, to come up and speak to us. This is not a dialogue with us. So we all sit up here like lumps and we listen, okay? We do not respond. We do not have a back and forth at this point. On a rare occasion, I will allow a member of council or a member of the administration to respond to a question. Generally speaking, the dialogue should be happening outside of these meetings. The reason for that is these meetings are our working meetings. The discussions are between us, not between the public and us, okay? I highly recommend that you have dialogues with every member of council, an actual conversation, not just emailing talking points, because that influences people far more than just sending out talking points. Now, if you'd like to speak tonight, I beg of you, please don't just read off talking points. Please, we've heard them. We've heard them many, many times. It doesn't sink in any better. So I will now open it up to the public. If you would like to speak, please come to the, what's missing is a lectern. State your name and address for the record.
What subjects are permitted?
Okay, for a council meeting, anything goes. We will allow you to speak on any topic. The maximum amount of time you have is 10 minutes.
I'm not gonna take 10 minutes, so don't panic.
You might.
I'm Bill Cleveland, Salida Road. I just want to emphasize one thing that has become more and more clear. And it has to do with the PUD, PUD, which was created specifically to change zoning to allow high-density housing. Perhaps only on one lanes or on the church, but possibly could apply elsewhere. And I just want to make it clear that the only purpose of that PUD appears to be to allow high-density housing. And the question I asked, but it's a rhetorical question. Why are we continuing to spend all this time on the PUD that doesn't seem to be wanted by very many people outside of the developer? We spend a lot of time debating the density, the style, the townhouses, the setback. All that kind of obfuscates the salient point that is, why do we want a PUD to create more high-density housing? Most of the people that have been vocal don't want more high-density housing, so it should become a moot point. All the provisos within that PUD, the setbacks, the density, and so on, really don't matter if you don't have the PUD. And the rhetorical question that I know you couldn't answer anyway is, who is it on council, if anyone, that actually wants more high-density residents in our town? That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you.
My name is Earl Curtis, and I live at 77523 Salida Road. I'm extremely encouraged by the mayor having a former mayor from Bay Village help us to see the vision. I think that's fantastic. I think that's exactly what we need to do. I want to thank council for being patient with us as we learn the process, and as you can tell by tonight, we as a group are starting to understand better. So thank you so much for that. This city has so much potential. I think we're all lit up now. The whole community sees it. And we can really make something of Andrews Road. And with the right vision, we have people that are invested, not only in our city, but outside our city. The news media came and it brought a lot of attention to people going, wow, there's something that can be done on this church. We have other people now interested in looking at that property. If we could just stop the Dollar General. There's a lot of good stuff happening. I think we're doing the right thing. We're doing our homework. And I think we can make this city amazing. The one last side note is that the city of Middleburg Heights has been going through this process, and it may seem long and arduous for us to have to deal with this, but we've only been tackling this, at least as a community, since March. Middleburg Heights has been going through it for 2 years. They're finally redoing all their ordinances. They have a lot of money, but they went and hired an outside consulting company to completely redo their zoning. And they're going to have state-of-the-art zoning for their city with a full vision, with even having fancy 3D drawings and maps and everything. I'm extremely encouraged by what their vision may turn out to be, because we could learn from that. We could see what they're doing good to make theirs happen. And hopefully it gets released soon, because then we can pull that into our little city and say, what do we want? What's going to make us where we want to be? We've got the ear of the news media that wants to make us a better city. We got the ear of council. We got the ear of the mayor and the administration. I think this is fantastic. Let's use this moment. This is our moment to bring this city to another level. Thank you, everybody.
Scott Wilhelm, 7573 Salida. Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So just in regards specifically to the issue of the dollar store, I did send an email to members of council and to Mr. Antifa as well, specifically, and that was on June 6, 2022. And what I brought forth from that, I won't read the entire email, what I kind of brought forth from that was that obviously many members of the community are obviously concerned about the Dollar General small box proposed store on Ambrose Road. One of the things I think that's important to look at, and we look at the actual zoning code of Mentor on the Lake in bullet point 12, 1240.01 outlines the purpose statement of the zoning code is to promote and protect the health, safety, and general welfare of Mentor on the Lake by regulating the use of its buildings and land for business use. I'm paraphrasing the pieces that pertain directly to a business such as a Dollar General or a small box store. There are other components there that also go into residential, but for this purpose, that's the portion I pulled out. I provided 6 different articles that are all recent. They've been published in the medical journals, basically anywhere between 2017 up to December of 2021. These are studies that have been done through the Family Practice Department at the University of Minnesota, things that have been done through tobacco industry specifically, and looked at 2 major different components that dollar stores, in terms of they do not feel actually benefit and meet the purpose statement of the zoning code of Mentor on the Lake to promote and protect health, safety, and general welfare of Mentor on the Lake. When you look at the nutritional aspect, there are currently about 30,000 dollar stores in the United States. Dollar General is actually the largest of those, occupying almost 20,000 of the 30,000 dollar stores in the United States today. If you look at Dollar General stores and they say that they promote health and nutrition by serving fresh foods and access to fresh produce, when you actually look at their own information, only 450 of those 20,000 stores in the United States actually serve fresh or perishable items within their stores. So that is 1.5% of all Dollar General stores specifically. So it's a very small fraction of all the stores in the United States that actually promote healthy nutritional food or produce or dairy items in their stores. Secondly, there have been multiple studies that have now started looking at the impact of dollar stores on the tobacco use in the United States. One of the things that Mr. Bittner brought up that we were interested in putting in the moratorium is making sure that we don't outlaw places like pharmacies that offer pharmaceuticals. CVS actually in 2010 recognized the fact that selling tobacco obviously does not promote health. They are people that are well affiliated and associated with the healthcare industry through pharmacies, and through other products that they present. They actually formally outlawed the selling of tobacco, and many other individual large pharmaceutical stores have followed in that line. However, in 2014, dollar stores actually recognized an opportunity monetarily to sell increasing amounts of cigarettes through their stores. Not all dollar stores do, Dollar General does. There's also been multiple studies that have looked at the cost of cigarettes that are sold by Dollar General stores. On average, they are 50 cents per pack cheaper than things that are sold in gas stations. And if you look at grocery stores and other areas, it can go up to anywhere to almost $1 or more than $1 per pack. So by having an additional Dollar General store here, they're going to sell lower cost cigarettes to the public than what would be bought at other places. Therefore, may, and some of these studies have shown, increase the amount of smoking use within communities. That certainly does not fall under health, safety, or general welfare as outlined by the zoning code. So I would certainly advocate and ask the council to strongly look at the moratorium that was proposed the other evening by planning and zoning against small box stores. And I would hope that you would vote in against additional stores here. Lastly, one of the other purposes of the specific committee that Mr. Johnson outlined, being headed by Mr. Bittner, in terms of the moratorium and looking at that, it is kind of the general concept. I'll sit down, think about it, let anyone else want to
It's
speak.
always the second
I
time
may come
around.
back up, I may have something more to add. But certainly those are the things that I would definitely outline in terms of my thoughts about voting for moratorium against small box stores, dollar stores, because of the health and safety outline that I've outlined here. Thank you.
Next.
Good evening, council, administration. Mr. Gray, 7574 Dahlia Drive. I am against Dollar General and against high density. But what I want to talk about is the potential, what is the status of the CARES Act redone, surplus, if there is any, 40,000 for CT consultants to create an evidence room / locker room. I'm not sure if that's viable. And then proposal from CT. Have we paid for CT to do a proposal? I haven't seen or heard of any sketches or renditions for $1.2 million renovation at the beach. And the road used to go 798 feet beyond Salida and 306 when it met. If we're going back that far with revetment and putting the beach back, maybe 1.2 sounds about right. I'm not quite positive 1.2 without sketches and topography and everything else. So we behoove City Council to pause on that. And then June 30th, our budgetary fiscal year from last year is going to finalize. With pause passing any type of financial discretionary spending until that has been finalized. And all head council has been emailed from the state of Ohio, third-party agency, to have received grounding to make future monetary regulations that impact taxpayers. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Come back up. It all came back. My apologies. Sorry, so just for the record again, Scott Wilhelm, 7573 Salida. So the other thing that Mr. Bittner had brought up and was another component that Mr. Johnson advocated was the concept of moratorium versus ordinances. So obviously moratoriums are designed for short-term use, and then as was brought up, well, what happens at the end of the moratorium? You have to go back, you have to either go back and reinstate it, or what are you going to do with it going forward? So one of the things obviously that would be much more powerful for the city in general for its utilization of how are we going to go forward is to create ordinances similar to what's been done, as the mayor brought up, for undesirable businesses, strip clubs, and things like that. And if we feel that a small box store for additional ones beyond what are already here, that moving forward with an ordinance might be a better way to go with that. Obviously, ordinances do take time. They have to go through multiple readings, as do all of our other processes. So that's one thing that was brought up. And It was brought up by the director of the Planning and Zoning Commission that one thing that we might consider asking our legal director is she inferred, and I have not been able to find this specifically myself within the city ordinances yet, is that if a new ordinance is in the process of being drafted, such as an ordinance against small box or dollar stores, that while that ordinance is in the process of being evaluated, that current or new applications for new businesses that have not been formally and finally approved should be postponed. And I think that just kind of goes to the concept that all we're asking for is time. You know, we need time for these things to transpire. And if a 12-month moratorium was not appropriate, I believe P&Z had suggested perhaps a 6-month moratorium might be something more appropriate. We are certainly open to looking at different time constraints as outlined by either the committee or by the council as a whole. But we're looking for time. I think there are mechanisms that we have that would hopefully try to avoid legal processes by Dollar General against us. And if that would fall underneath it, and perhaps our law director could look into that, if creating an ordinance does decrease the chance or essentially slow down an application process until that ordinance has been formally reviewed and finalized and voted on, that might be something that would help us. And that's also why I outlined the language that I did specifically in what the zoning ordinance is that already exists in our ordinances as to why Dollar Generals may not be a favorable thing for this community.
I really tried not to talk it for one of these meetings. Test Terry, 737 Salida. I heard it a couple times mentioned tonight about the funding for the revetment work at Loba Beach and the price tag. But there is Lake County, Cuyahoga County, and one other county that has gotten a lot of funding through the American Rescue Plan Act funds. There was an article in the paper about Painesville moving ahead with amphitheater splash pad plans after receiving state funding. I don't know if this is something anyone has looked into. Maybe, get with a mentor or something, or look at it on your own. Willoughby is building a pier. They are using state funds. So there is money available, and although it's just an article in the News Herald, I would like this entered in the meeting minutes. It would be helpful for you all to look forward into possibly relieving some of the financial burden.
Anybody else?
Feels like it's sliding
Didn't use up all your 10 minutes last time?
Just following up on Tessa's comments, I keep hearing this 1.2 million. And it's a lot of money. You don't have the money. And I'm wondering why it's that high. How much is simply going into engineering for something that's done all the time along here? If you get a hold of either Chris Haynes or Mike Huffman, both people I know personally, they do most of the revetment work. They did the Euclid lakefront development, the whole thing, as well as several neighbors here. And what we really need there is the proper back drainage and the rocks. The rocks were $35 a ton, shipped out of Marblehead. I bought it before. And basically shipped delivered runs you up to about $70 a ton. And generally you can do a revetment, if that's the main situation there, for somewhere in the ballpark of $600 a linear foot of lakefront. And I forget I don't know how many feet we have at the lake there, but I think it's not more than 300 or 400. So just doing simple mathematics, I'm just wondering how we get up to 1.2. I've done several revetment projects in Lake County. I have a partner who has, the $1 million insurance policy that's required. And I have access to the equipment, the trucking, and so on and so forth. I don't really want to do the project. I have enough experience to think about, sometimes when the municipality gets involved, somehow the price escalates way up beyond what it would be for, say, a private citizen doing the same project.
Okay, anybody else? Once, going twice. All right, moving on. Legislation before council, resolution number 2022-R-13, if you please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-13, second reading. A resolution approving the 2023 budget.
Educational moment here. Normally at this time, I would ask if there's any motions. No one here can suspend the rules for this because it's the budget. The budget requires 3 readings. It cannot be suspended. Okay, so we'll stay on, and we'll go to 3rd reading. Moving on to the next one, ordinance number 2022-0-05. Please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-05, third reading, referred to Council of the Whole and Planning and Zoning Commission. An ordinance creating chapter 1255, Lakefront Planned Unit Development, BUD, District of the Codified Ordinances.
Okay, so at the committee of the whole meeting, there were a lot of, and from planning and zoning, there were a lot of changes that were made. At this moment, is there a motion to amend to reflect those changes? Motion to amend has been made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Moore. Is there any discussion? Okay, then we'll go to roll call.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
No.
Mr. Johnson.
Abstain. Okay, so that has now amended ordinance 2022-0-05 to reflect the changes that were made by the committee of the whole. Is there any discussion? Any other motions at this moment?
We're sending it back to.
We will be referring it back to another committee of the whole meeting that we will be scheduling later in this meeting. Okay,
Next planning zone.
no. Ordinance number 2022-0-07, if you'll please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-07, third reading. An ordinance to amend the 2022 appropriation ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Questions or comments on this? Is there a motion to approve? On 3rd reading, folks.
So many.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mr. Lunder. I'm glad everyone's awake. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-07 has passed. Ordinance number 2022-0-09. You'll please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-09, second reading, referred to Planning and Zoning Commission. An ordinance establishing a 12-month moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for zoning and/or occupancy permit approvals for small box discount stores and the issuance of such approvals in the city of Benner on the Lake and declaring an emergency.
Okay, this was referred to planning and zoning. It has come back now. They had some changes to it. They changed it to a 6-month moratorium. They had stricken a number of the whereases. And then they added some verbiage about small box stores. Is there any discussion at this point?
That might be the third, so.
With the minutes, it's on actual draft copy. I don't have a Word copy of them and I have not had time.
Is there any motion here?
Make the motion, we amend it. The planning and zoning. Suggested.
The motion made to amend it to reflect planning and zoning changes. Seems to be some confusion over what they all are. Okay, what I'm going to do then is refer that also to the committee of the whole meeting. This will end up being on a third reading at the next meeting if everyone is amenable to that. We'd rather make sure we get it right if we're going to do something. And to try and do it here when there's confusion over what the words are going to be.
Could we get a copy of those minutes?
Make sure that every member has a copy of what those changes were proposed by planning and zoning.
Should have got the draft on Friday.
I just responded to Suzanne's. So maybe there might have been one or two missing. We'll actually get it.
We'll just double check and we'll make sure of that. Okay. So if there's no objection, we'll put it on third reading. Everyone okay with that?
Let's do a check.
It was never seconded, so it doesn't matter. Okay. So ordinance number 2022-0-09 will go on third reading so that we can review the amendments made by planning and zoning. That will be referred to the committee of the whole, which I will schedule later. Okay. Old business. Is there any old business? Being none, is there any new business?
Mr. President, can we go back to the planning and zoning? Excuse me, Mr. Chabot's report. Did the planning and zoning commission vote on a recommendation on that?
Yes.
They, with the amendments, they voted to approve it, correct? Okay, and so you want to add that to your report, correct? So it's part of the minutes, correct? Oh. Just so, that's right, because our amendment process talks about, action being taken by the planning and zoning. So that, if they voted on it, and they voted to approve it, then that takes care of that.
You don't mind.
Anything else there under new business?
If I could, they were discussing about the planning and zoning minutes in the last meeting on June 6th. We did receive it, at least I did, on Friday, June 10th, at 1:31. So they were sent out.
Make sure everybody again has a new copy just to make sure we're all on the same page. Expenditure approval, this needs to be done tonight. First be done tonight. It's for the architectural and engineering services for police department improvements. You all received a memorandum of that. Is there a motion to approve?
Discussion.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I question, these improvements, and I understand the need for them. But was there any consideration given to possibly making these improvements with the idea of eventually adding on to it to improve all of City Hall, the City Hall complex? For example, like, I know the city administration is very compact. There's a lot of office space that you could probably use more of. So rather than put a Band-Aid on what the police department does or needs, find a way so that that could be done to improve their condition. That if money comes available in the future, that City Hall could be improved, the fire department could be improved. Am I explaining that right? Because City Hall was actually done in stages in the past. Right. Fire department was built first with the rest of the complex added on. I'd just like to see, you know, if we're gonna spend serious money to improve their conditions, which I'm all for, that we could do it in such a way that if grants or funds become available through another means, that the entire administration area could be done, the entire police department could be done, and eventually the fire department could be done. We look into that before we go crazy.
I'll let Ms. Bartone give you the breakdown of this, but there's, the reason this is the money that it is really, correct me if I'm wrong, it's totally redoing this whole back portion. And it's not just, it's moving several. It's not just, let's say walls and things like that. It's utilities, right? And other things that are in this. The idea of waiting until, this money is available to us now. We have until the end of 2023. And this just seemed like the opportunity to get something like this done. And not, we could say, well, later on, maybe we get a grant or do something else, but, many years back, we had thoughts of, using the property over here and putting in a whole new municipal center. I just don't see, I don't see that money available. And to us, at least, this is the best possible solution to make sure that they have the facilities to change their clothes, everything else that they need to do, and get away from, the clutter that's back there right now.
Again, I'm not opposed to that idea, just the idea that it's done in such a way that if money should become available, because who knew this would become available? That we do so in such a way that that can be expanded upon. Such as I know they use that room for an interrogation room, correct? It'd be nice if they had an interrogation office. It would be nice if you and the city administrator didn't have to share it. It would be nice if the fire department had a proper for their staff. But it takes a little idea, a little planning that, okay, if we do this segment of it, that we can add on to that if money becomes available to do so. Rather than say, okay, we're just gonna wipe out City Hall one day, and go to the roof.
The intent of this would be, when we think about expanding what we have here, I just don't see it happening. I think what you're suggesting is, I'm okay with the space that we have. Sharing an office is not the space that the administration has. I'm not here. They have the space. They've improved the space, through the funds that we received. I don't see where we could add on anywhere to this building, which I believe is what you're suggesting. We were able to get the library for the firefighters, to house them in there. And I don't know where anywhere around here, as you can see now, if there's a baseball game or something, this is full out here. And not that that's, this is seasonal, but I don't see us adding on, anytime soon.
Yeah, so that's okay. I'm just looking for a little vision of how we can do this work with the thought in mind that then moving forward into the future, that the space could be better utilized.
Well, we're trying to make this space better utilized by doing it.
I can expand on this. So since COVID started, and we had a lot of repurposed space, given we needed to separate and all of their stuff and everything else. We have since we changed a little bit of the staffing up there. We had one person in the separate zoning office on their own island across the hall. When she left, the mayor's idea was for us to share an office. Makes sense. Not here during the day either. So we're not really sharing an office per se, except councilmen. So that to me isn't an issue either. It doesn't really matter. So we have 3 full-size offices up front plus the reception area. We turned that front office that used to house 1 person into now our records room for all of our property files. It's no longer shared with the interrogation room. So it's now just an interrogation room for them. Part of this plan, and any members of council who would like a tour of the facilities next door are more than welcome, for words of the police chief. I met with CT on multiple occasions, and this, again, this started well over a year ago, along with the lieutenant, because he would be part of the project planning for this. Part of this is to build a new interrogation room that's completely wired and completely, I'm not going to call state of the art, because we don't have state of the art here or anything, but it would be far better than what they have now. All of the police, everything would be on that side of the building, self-contained over there. Their storage locker that we kind of use in the back and they use as no heat, no air conditioning. It's just miserable all the time. Our records room, or their records room and evidence room it's not very well climate controlled. That could pose issues in the future. They're not concerned about it. I'm more concerned about it. They have concrete floors. They have a 6-inch pipe coming out of this side of the building into that room that supplies all of their heat and air conditioning. It doesn't clearly work very well because it's 12 feet ceiling. It's one big open room with a bunch of lockers in the middle. We have male and female officers on staff. We have 1 half bath with a toilet and a sink in it. There are no other rooms in there to change. There's nowhere for them to get cleaned up, changed, or do anything, shower, let alone go home to their families and whatever they're in that day. I don't feel that it's appropriate for them to have to take that home with them, or change in their cars, or do anything else. We are way behind in taking care of that part of the building. Yes, the fire department everyone can always use something. As far as the administration side, without rebuilding, I don't see any other way to make use the best way that we can. The only other thing I want to do in this room is replace that godforsaken curtain. After that, we're using every inch of this building to its capacity. Even the janitor's closet down the hall, we want to move all of that. All of the power needs to be moved for the locker room to be properly assessed. We would have to put in all the HVAC, all of the flooring, all of the plumbing, all of that. That is budget because we have to go out to bid for all of that stuff because we're government entity. So CT is in charge of doing all of the bid work, doing all of the processing, doing all the contracts that is beyond my capacity and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. That's why they get paid to do what they do. They make sure everything is done properly. I'm just here to make sure that it gets done within the budget. Like I said, you are more than welcome to look next door. I get your point for a grand plan. I think if we had more money down the road in the fire department, we built a bedroom for them to bring out 4 staff members. It's a bedroom. They sleep, they answer calls. They have their day room where they can do all of that stuff. They haven't brought any necessary need to me in the last couple of years as far as large projects other than we put in the exhaust system. That was their biggest concern. We did that. That's installed. There has not been a voice at any level saying we need more capital improvements. We keep the parking lot available, putting it, we've looked at maybe connecting the buildings, but it just logistically doesn't work with the bay, the way that it's set up and the annex on the other side. That would need completely torn down. And that's just, in my opinion, not a very fiscal, responsible way to spend taxpayer money on something that's already working pretty efficiently. For the police department, it's long overdue. And this is, and like I said, this is part of the money that came in round 3. American Recovery Act, I think it was around 3. We're going to get the other half this year. So we still have that half left to appropriate, which is what would, given the economy, I fully anticipate this being quite costly, obviously, if we do. And to Ms. Turi's point with the other state funds, I have applied for those and talked to Antoine's office many times. And I put in my submission, I put in my requests if if his latest push from the budget goes through and we get additional money that's been reappropriated from the state, I would love to put that additional money towards the revetment program, just a cut. But that's a maybe. We have the SID available to us to borrow that money. We should be using that mechanism when it's available as opposed to borrowing money for a building that there is no other explanation. Just that's why I'm requesting.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So made.
Motion made by Mr. Lunder,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Abstain.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Okay, open to the public to speak. John, if you'd like to speak, please come to the missing lectern. State your name and address for the record.
Bill Cleveland, Slide Road. Just a quick question. Is the $39,660 the fee that we're paying to CT, or is that the money to actually do the work? Said vendor CT items, 39 grand. Is that CT's fee?
I guess I'll let you answer.
Yeah.
I kind of like to leave them hanging though. It's kind of fun.
That contract covers the cost to go out to bid, collect all of the bids, do all of the paperwork, oversee the entire project from start to finish. So that's the cost of their services,
So
not
that's,
for the construction. All of the
that's just
construction was over
CT's
separate.
fee
Yes.
for a relatively minor remodel on a couple of rooms. It's pretty, I mean, I just stayed in business and construction. I never got this.
The problem is anytime we have to go out, we have to go out to bid. So, and it requires, we don't have.
This is not.
Okay,
this is not-
question was answered. It's no longer a discussion. Moving on. I run a tight ship.
Susan Lanahan, 7359 Salida. Thank you all for your time, for hearing us out. I know there's not questions, so I'm looking for a clarification, which should put you guys in the spotlight. On the moratorium, Chair Kason mentioned that she wanted those amendments, everybody voted, passed those, approved and passed them through, and she said she wanted to see them voted on an emergency reading at the next council meeting. But what I'm understanding is nobody has that updated moratorium. Is that, did I hear that correct? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand.
I will clarify. Not everyone has completely caught up on what those changes are, and we haven't had a chance to discuss them. So we are going to discuss them at the next
Council.
committee, the whole meeting,
Okay. So
and then it
kind
will
of-
be on third reading at the next meeting.
Okay, so then it kind of goes back to something I was asking earlier, and Mr. Lyons, I think you addressed before, but we're all still very confused. Where's Dollar General in this process? Because the moratorium, part of the reason we're all fighting for it is, of course, to see if we could stop that process. So all of us are still confused on where we're at. Can somebody please explain to us, this is our probably 5th or 6th meeting. As far as the moratorium goes, probably the 3rd. Can somebody explain where we are in that process?
I will allow Mr. Lyons to speak, but he only gets 10 minutes.
Oh, boy. Let's see what have we got.
Bill Cleveland man gets up and talks a bunch of times. On Thursday, I gave copy of this case. It's an abusive person. 1960, Ohio Supreme Court. After all, it says that as somebody puts in their application, can't change the zoning once that appears to be the state. A number of communities have passed the moratorium. Because I wasn't aware of a number of things, but I just looked at them. A number of things had been. But, you know, I researched said that he can't, they don't have to agree with the moratorium. They can't. They can make an argument for the board. Ultimately, the moratorium can't. If they challenge it, well, they challenge it. I think we have told the administrative council, what the risks are.
So based on that application that's in so far, I mean, what would the claim of damages be?
I'm not
That have purchased
I'm not
property.
concerned about damages. The damages issue discussed by U.S. Supreme Court moratorium passed by the Lake Tahoe area. They put a moratorium on any kind of development. U.S. Supreme Court said that moratorium didn't automatically give them the right to damages or something. In other words, taking of the property. Damages would be taking of the property that we have taken something away that is valid. Said the U.S. Supreme Court said it's a case of I'm not, the main issue is whether or not moratorium goes in, or not. They go to court. I think I've said before, I have my opinion in terms of which way to work.
They haven't purchased the property, so that's why the timing of the moratorium for this community is very relevant.
Most property transactions have to be taken the way that they do it. These moratoriums pretty much always apply to these kind of situations. If they happen to own it, perhaps that's.
That's my thought. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Before, just back to Wilhelm's piece, the issue of that was raised in the moratorium ordinance that I was told by Mr. Morris that Jason didn't take much up. Did have other zoning licensing sections in it. That council can pass properly and not be subject to any court. So we still have the right to regulate businesses. It's just back to Wilhelm stuff. I would give them a note. Since I have 10 minutes, I was going to tell you after the meeting to send your studies that you mentioned from the Holly.
I didn't order them to Mayor Eva, so I will.
But also,
I
I
get
said,
an email from them.
but better yet, present them to the planning and zoning commission. So that becomes part of the record. And I would think that we can get that.
And they were sent to council by email from Mayor Eva on June 6th, so I will certainly forward them to whoever else you would like me to, or if anyone from council.
So, but just what it sounds to me, right, that those studies are talking about the goods that they sell are being sold to poor people, selling that at lower cost to poor people. Those studies have concluded that selling things to poor people, such as cigarettes and that, and whatnot, hurts all people, but especially poor people.
So the studies themselves did not specifically reflect income brackets of people who purchased, but you could theoretically infer that Dollar General puts things into areas, but
Aren't the poor people in this country, aren't they the ones, okay, who are predominantly smoking and the people in
there's no, I mean, if you look at the rates of lung cancer in the United States, you can certainly see that patients who present with lung cancer related to smoking, who are in economically disparaged areas or have lower income, certainly present with more advanced cancers because of their potential lack of access to healthcare. And that's a major problem of healthcare disparities within this country. But specifically in terms of Dollar General stores or box stores like this, increase the opportunity. I don't believe, and I can go back and look through those studies that I gave. There were 2 on smoking and 4 on nutritional impacts. I can certainly try to look to see if they broke anything down by economics in those particular things. Or
If you ever
I'll take a
come
look.
across a study in terms of.
I am gonna interrupt. You guys
Okay.
moved on to a discussion.
Everybody dance like 10 minutes, I smoking.
I've lost interest.
Four.
But anyone else? Would you like?
That's just sort of just, if I, in terms of just a question back to law director, that does not pertain to any of the questions that have just been discussed. Would be specifically to the issue that I did raise that was brought up by at the planning and zoning meeting was as opposed to a moratorium, if this goes along the lines of creating an ordinance against additional small box, and it was discussed, should this be done by the city in general? Should it be done by distance? Should it be done by overall acreage of the city? Be it as it may, in any of those things. Do you know in our current Manor of the Lake ordinances that if a new ordinance is being created that would specifically relate to a new business or an application that is currently in process but has not been finalized as to whether or not that application should be postponed? Because that was suggested, but I haven't personally found that yet, and I don't know if you know or if it's something you could look into.
Okay, you can answer that.
Okay, 124207 says that. Okay, it's like. If there's a ordinance that's pending, then everything goes on to the 90 days. And I told Mr. Morris, look at that ordinance, it doesn't say whether or not it's pending. Well, it's maybe a whole- that application for 90 days. I think that there's once again, an excellent article. Next ordinance is passed, adopted in 1979. After the 1960. So I think that they, once again, will still have that same argument that the ordinance can't overrule the Constitution. Now, how a court would look at that, I don't know. That's what the ordinances are. They're not the rule on that. There is something that's there, the moratorium is something that is, and it was super well worked.
Jeff Schick, 7533 Salida Road. Quick things, compliment the community for being engaged with the mayor, with the council members individually. It's helping all of us understand. As a follow-on to that, in relation to these last groups of comments, is that kind of individual back and forth available to us with Mr. Lyons as we try to understand some of the details of these ordinances? How would we do that? Like we've done with you and others in a less formal setting. I don't know who will.
I would say that probably isn't going to happen. I think that would be more, you send the questions to us, we would ask the law director. Because otherwise we're paying it by the hour. If he's like, you guys, and that could be like, weeks and weeks and weeks worth of hours. No offense or anything.
You answered prior to his volunteering.
I think it's a bad idea. And the reason I think it's a bad idea, I mean, here in this public meeting, everybody's hearing the same thing. It's part of the record, there's minutes that are being made of it. But if I have a meeting or you call me up and I say something to you, and you don't quite, I never quite know what people understand in terms of what I have said. And then once they walk away, tell somebody else that maybe same as what I said, maybe a little bit different. And you just can't control that kind of flow of information. So I think it becomes difficult for a lawyer in that kind of situation or a public body.
No, I understand. I mean, that's why I wanted to ask the question, so that we can better understand. If we have to find our own technical resource to help us understand state law, policy, procedure, practice, application, we can do that and then come back with a more formal question through you and through the mayor, right? Thank you.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice, all right. Announcements and settings of meetings. First up, we have the public hearing on resolution number 2022-R-13. That's the 2023 budget. That is scheduled for the next council meeting, Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 at 7 p.m. There will be a public hearing on ordinance number 2022-0-05 on Tuesday, July 12th at 7 p.m. That is the one that was postponed from tonight. So again, that is Tuesday, July 12th at 7 p.m. Going to schedule a committee of the whole meeting Tuesday, June 21st, 7 p.m. to review the PUD and CRA. You can't be there? Okay, then we'll pick a different night. What do we got available? You guys have the 20th available? Yes.
Are we having our meeting?
Yeah.
Having on the 20th?
Yeah.
You guys haven't announced it yet, so. If I beat you guys to it, too bad. All right, so June 20th, 7 p.m. Okay, so that's committee of the whole meeting, Monday, June 20th at 7 p.m. That's for the review of the PUD changes and CRA. Oh, and the moratorium. So 3 topics on that night. Review the PUD changes, CRA, and the moratorium. Not necessarily in that order. Probably moratorium, flood, then CRA. Okay, next regular agenda meeting will be June 23rd, 2022 at 6 p.m. Next regular meeting of council will be June 28th, 7 p.m. Other meetings.
Special committee meeting. It's also going to be on the 20th. You guys want to do 6? Well, first off, do you think that's enough time for you guys to review those?
Review what? The other 8 report?
Yeah. Yeah. Or do you guys want more time? It's up to you.
You think an hour is long enough for us to conduct our meeting?
Based on your last one.
We have a clear understanding what.
Now. What's that?
No, I think the 20th would be apropos, because if we're gonna discuss the moratorium.
Here's the deal. We get through what we can. We start at 6.
If we're gonna discuss that at the moratorium, at the committee of the whole, the next, that night, why not do it?
That's fine. What time do you want? 6 or 6? 6 it is.
Try to be good.
It's fine.
Okay, so that's a special committee, June 20th at 6 p.m. Any other committees or commissions meeting?
Ordinance?
That one, I don't know, Mrs. Thompson's the chair of that committee, and without her being here, we can set one and see if it works with the schedule.
Rather,
at this point, we'll just set one and we'll let her know, and if we need to change it, then we can always fix it and announce it.
So what date and time do you have in mind for the ordinance committee?
The only thing I'm looking at is the 27th.
27th, the room is reserved at 6:30.
What about the 22nd?
Reserved from 6:15 to 8:15. Oh, calendar, you should be proud of it.
You're doing good.
What dates are open?
Fridays are beautiful for everybody.
No.
Mondays.
29th, 30th,
29th is fine by me. The 30th would be good.
29th at 7 would work.
hearing ordinance committee, 29th of June at 7 PM, is that correct? Okay. Are there any other meetings?
I do have a question. Is it the intent of council just to meet once in July and once in August?
That is correct.
Okay, that's not gonna change.
So that is correct. Well, there's no intention to change that, at least at this point.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
But yes, July and August, we will only be meeting once each month, and it will be the second Tuesday of each month. They seem to think they deserve summer hours or something, but anyway. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So made.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Right.
Mrs. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.